Welcome to the Roniel and DaRon podcast show. I'm Roniel.
I'm DaRon.
Man, what's up with all of these flares these days? I mean, everybody's flaring up about a lot of different things today. Like, it was just like, what was it, like a couple of days ago? And it was flares and people was talking about the end of the world. We're going to die. And flares is coming in like we don't already have flares coming from the sun all the time and radiation. I mean,
Right.
What the hell?
All day, every day. I mean, as you said, big flares occur incredibly frequently, and they always say, oh, well, it's going to knock out satellites. It's going to bring about the destruction of IT everywhere, which ignores the fact that we've had satellites out in deep space for a good long time that still operate, and that we've been doing this for a long time. And we make them for... all of that equipment is actually well insulated from stuff like that, but you also have most of them sit within Earth's orbit, so they're protected.
I mean, so I'm guessing we're going to bring about another Y2K that never happened. Remember that whole thing?
I do.
Oh my God. I was like, look at this. It never happened. I was waiting that year and I'm like 2000. Oh man. 2000. Oh man, it's going to be messed up. Like we're going to be the end of the world, and it never happened.
The Linux version of Y2K is coming up soon enough anyway, right?
Oh, yeah. No.
It'll kill us all.
People, here's the biggest problem, especially with the scams and everything that's going on. Stop listening to people.
Yeah.
People do not know what they're talking about. Okay, if you really want to really get into things, start learning about some, get into science, do something, learn how things work.
Right.
Stop fucking listening to people. Excuse my language, but stop listening to people. If there's any kids listening to this, sorry to say this, but stop listening to people. Okay. Use your own head, use your own brain. Come on now. Like, stop following people like you're following who. Stop following people. Okay. But anyway, the world is not ending. I'm not saying I know anything specific, but the world's not ending. I don't think anytime soon. And like DaRon said, that there's things to protect from these things, and I'm sure there's flares all the fucking time. So hey, it's okay. It's all right. With that being said, let's get into this little Dune thing, because I really want to know your perspective on that. I've talked to a few people about how they felt about it, and spoiler alert, there may be some spoilers in here, but if you have not seen it already, then you need to leave and go see it and then come back and watch the video. So what are your thoughts?
I loved it. I honestly loved it. I read the books. I've mentioned before, I read all the way through Children of Dune, and I liked how it stuck to the books much better than the 1980s version. It wasn't as ridiculous. I mean, the 1980s version is an embarrassment. I showed it to my children a few years ago. I mean, they had read, several of them had already read Dune by then, and they were utterly confused by it. It was, but that's what happens when you get, like, you had Sting and what's his name? That skinny British guy, Rod Stewart, and some other weird people in there. It's like, why are they here? Why are they here? It's like Jennifer Lopez in a movie.
Oh, wow. Or Ben Affleck. Saying that name is death.
Oh, my God.
They'd say he's the worst actor. Like, I think he was very horrible in Daredevil. That was just horrible. Did you really like it?
No.
I was going to say, oh my God.
No. He's like Kristen Stewart. She can't act either. I mean, they have one face and it's on all the time. It doesn't matter if the face makes sense in that scene. That is her. Kristen Stewart always looks like, well, I'll use the politer version of this. She looks like she's mad all the time. Okay, that's the polite version. If you want to know what other people think, I agree with what they think, and I'll let you read between the lines.
Are you trying to say she has RBF?
Yes.
She has that face. Yeah. So if you don't know what it is, go look it up, and then you can see what it is. But yeah, like, he always have that plain stupid face.
Yes.
And I'm like, stop.
Yes.
Change it up. And I was so happy they got rid of him as Batman on Justice League. Oh my gosh, why? And I'm not even happy with the Flash with Batman being Michael Keaton. I mean, yeah, he's cool, but he was cool for the first one, but I don't want to see him again.
Right.
I mean, and he has all this weird looking faces and shit and gray hair. He's old as shit. I mean, Batman got old, but I'm just saying, I don't want to see him as Batman. If they put him as Batman in the Justice League, I'm gonna be pissed off.
It'd be like bringing Val Kilmer back.
Oh man, that was horrible. Why did they put Val Kilmer as Batman? I mean, he was a nice looking guy. Don't get me wrong, but I mean, what we had. Oh man, it got even worse. George Clooney.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, what? You know what I'm saying? Like, we couldn't find anybody better. Like, you know what I'm saying? And don't get me wrong, I still love The Dark Knight, but I just didn't like that voice. I mean, everybody's freaking out over the Batman that's coming out because of the voice. Like,
right.
What? It was like a pedophile voice.
Right. I never understood that. It made no sense to me. It made no sense.
Mm-mm.
Talking
Batman
like you have a
talk
horse.
like that.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Talking like you have a hoarse voice doesn't like change anything, because when you get a cold, everyone's gonna be like, "Oh my God, it's Batman."
Yeah, you know, like, oh man,
I need a throat lozenge.
Yeah, that's how it sounds. Like, he sounded like he was hoarse, like he was dying or something. I'm like, why are you talking like that? Just talk regular. You don't have to talk like that.
Yeah.
Why are you talking like that?
There are better ways.
A whole lot of better ways. But yeah, I really like Dune. It was dope. I cannot wait to part 2. And if anybody hasn't seen that, they did train the little collie in that movie, and some of it wasn't as realistic as I would have liked it to be, but it was still pretty cool with the fighting scene. But they were all drills.
Yeah, they were drills.
They were doing drills like the 6 counts and the Wally, different drills that, you know, Collie does, and wasn't realistic, and especially the knife. They were just, I mean, I guess different system, but we don't use super long knives.
Right. Using a crease doesn't make sense in this context. The way they're trying to use it, there are much better fighting styles and ways of engaging the blade. That was weird. No,
there were just some things I didn't like. And then again, we don't, well, realistically, you're probably not going to carry 2 swords around. You're not going to be carrying swords around anyway. And if you have a stick, you're going to have 1 stick, because it's not even practical to be able to fight with 2. But in Kali, they use both weapons. But mainly the way I was taught, the way I'm taught now, is 1 weapon. And maybe you might have 2 daggers. I don't even see the point in Kali using a stick and a dagger. But I mean, hey, I was the purpose of it. But either way, there was some Kali reference there. They did some Kali movement. So any Kali fans or any Kali people out there, awesome. Eskrima, our niece, all of y'all should be proud, because it was pretty cool. So I can't wait to see the second one to see how they actually interact. And hopefully they're not too drilling in that one. Maybe they'll do more actual fighting.
Yeah, something a little more free flow.
Yeah. And I would love to see what kind of empty hand fighting they're going to use. And I believe they're going to use C-Lot. It seems like a lot of that is being referenced. Like, by the way, did you ever see the G.I. Joe movie Snake Eyes, which was a horrible movie, by the way?
No.
If you notice, a lot of the Indonesian actors, and I guess they're saying they're better fighters, but they're playing the Japanese, like the ninjas and stuff. Like,
it's because all Asians look alike, right?
No way. You can tell the difference.
I can. Actually,
you know
I can. Like, I can look at it. Oh, you're from Korea. I even know which Korea. You're from this part of Japan. You're from Okinawa. I can tell you which part of China you're from.
Like I said, there's probably more, but you can look at their eyes and just see the difference. And
it's actually very true.
I know this guy, and he plays. You seen Raid 1 and 2?
Yes.
Yeah, he literally played in Raid. He was the main character, and he played as the ninjutsu instructor and master. And I'm like, this guy's not Japanese. Yeah, I'm not saying that they all have to be Japanese to be a ninjutsu, but this was a clan, tribe, or
right.
And
there were only two clans that practiced it.
Yeah, and this guy was not even Japanese. And you know how the Japanese believe in things. Like, you had to be Japanese. Like, this guy wasn't Japanese.
Yeah.
Like, and he's a master, and I'm like, he's doing silat. He's not even doing karate or none of that. Like, he's not what? He's not even doing ninjutsu. Like, What is that? So I was kind of pissed off with that. I didn't like that at all. I was like, if you're gonna do a story like that, you need to get actual Japanese people, like not
Right. Uh,
Indonesian people.
Well, as if they didn't have Japanese martial artists who happen to be actors. They exist. Well, and this goes to interesting and similar point. In Dune, they changed the sex of the kind.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what? Liaquine is supposed to be a male, and there's a reason why he's a male, and it's important. And to swap his sex, swapping the race, I don't really care about. I mean, it's fictitious, although most of the people should have been Arab or Persian or Arab looking, because it was actually based on the Middle East. That's the foundation. The foundation is the Middle East, and it's Lawrence of Arabia is. That is that foundation there. But what Frank Herbert did so beautifully for Dune was he pulled parts of actual cultural historical facts, and then he pulled them apart, stretched them, which shows the intricacies of what all he was actually talking about, the intricacies of what was a religious war. It was a religious war between the conquering forces, the Christian conquering forces, and the Arab Muslims. And that's what he's really describing. And that's where you have the, Harkonnen or Harkonnen, or however you choose to pronounce it, versus the Fremen. And honestly, the whole thing is absolutely brilliant. I feel by switching, like they did what Hollywood has been doing a bit lately, where they've got, I'm going to say it, a bunch of tokens. You know what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. I mean, and you're left going, but none of these people make sense. This doesn't make sense. The context of it blows the mind. And unfortunately, when you start doing things like changing the sex, because that really actually was important. If you read the stories, the sex was important of Liaquines, especially given the way the societies, the cultures operated. It breaks apart a little bit. I wish they hadn't done that, but I really did like the movie. But I mean, I feel like I'm nitpicking at this point, but I really did like the movie. It's funny because looking at this a little more, I think Hollywood took the wrong message from the So White controversy that occurred a little bit ago. And to give a good example, they made Anne Boleyn, an actual historical character, who was white because she was British, black.
Yeah.
I mean, and that screws with people because we already have that Afrocentric history that's going around and saying things like, well, Cleopatra was black, which is not true. We know what she looked like in general because there are coins with her face on it. She was very Greek, which makes sense because her lineage was Greek.
Right.
And things of this nature. So by changing the race of random actual historical characters, that's not the proper approach. I think there would be outrage if, for example, we went through and we took Shaka Zulu. Yeah. And we made him white. He, of course, was the leader of the Zulus. And I think that would be just as wrong because from my perspective, I look at it and I'm going, well, but historically, these are real people. And I'm not saying that they have to match look-wise or any of that kind of stuff. The Downfall, I believe it was, is a movie about the last days, so to speak, of Nazi Germany. That gentleman did not look exactly like Hitler. And I don't know if he was German or not, but it didn't make much of a difference because he was, he fit the general characteristics. And then, of course, you can touch it up and make him look in a way that makes sense with makeup and all that other good stuff. See, that makes sense. That's okay. But if you turn Sitting Bull, for example, or Crazy Horse or Black Elk into a completely different race, that would be very offensive to me. That would be incredibly offensive to me. And I don't think it's right to do it to European figures just because it fits some political narrative, because you're destroying history. It's history. We're talking about history.
I don't think people understand that, so it'll never read into Hollywood's mind about that.
No,
but it's all about money to them, so they don't really care.
that's exactly right. That's exactly right. By the way, if you don't watch international movies, I mean, there are some fantastic Nollywood, Bollywood. Korea has absolutely. Hollywood has been stealing off Korea for over 10 years now. I don't know if you knew that. Yep. Which is funny because the Koreans 20 years ago were stealing off Hollywood. So Hollywood's stealing off Korea's.
Just flipped.
It's similar to anime, like we've discussed. Yeah. Anime is the Japanese's attempt at Western art. And so when Westerners go through and do anime, it's weird.
Look the same.
Right.
It does not look the same.
No, it doesn't.
But I will say I have seen some really good and see, I've always been a Dragon Ball Z fan, so when I see some really good stuff like that, the artwork from Americans would be dope. But and I'm not just talking about just Dragon Ball Z. I mean, there's a bunch of animes like Cowboy Bebop, all of those things that I really love. But I mean, just see them go and try to do this, I was like, just quit, just stop. We have our portion. We're good at what we do. They're good at what they do. Let it be. No crossing.
Well, it's just funny to me because I look at it and I'm going, this is a pale imitation of a pale imitation.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're diluting it, which is ironic. And the reason why the Japanese started doing that was, of course, because their art wasn't as big on detail and realism as Western art at the time was. And actually, most Japanese artists at the time were Korean. Once they took over Korea, they started importing all of these Koreans by force and putting them in the courts of the various lords, daimyos.
Well, anime is dope. Like, it's one of the dopest cartoons I've seen. And then they, even though we know it's fiction, it just goes to a whole new level. So, but one thing that gets me with anime is that a lot of them, you already know they're going to do similar shit.
Yeah.
Like the robots. Okay. You can be in like some type of like 1980s or something. And then you have this big ass Gundam robot coming out of nowhere. I'm like, where the fuck did this come from? Like, it doesn't make sense.
Right.
They're driving around in old ass cars, and they're in the old century, and they got Gundam robots. Like, where the fuck just come? Like Yasuke. Like, I was thinking that I didn't understand. Like, if you're trying to tell a story about a character that's supposed to be real, and then you add in some fictional shit. Like, it was fun and funny, but it was just like, okay, this is not realistic. So they're gonna come out of somewhere with some Gundam big ass robot and some weird ass mystical shit, and I'm just like, okay, this just went off the rails.
They like their robots,
but it's a part of their thing, like you know what I'm saying. And I just found it hilarious. But you got to start switching it up. Like, eventually you keep doing the same thing over and over, and people are going to start deviating to other places.
Well, and to that point, so much of anime is merely Dragon Ball Z with different characters. They've copied it because it was so successful. I mean, I can't blame them. It was so insanely successful, but they just copy. It's like, you guys, the Japanese are very creative. Their traditions, their culture is very, very different than the Western culture. I would like to see more of it where they talk about that, where they play on that, where they use that. Like, they've got these, they were much more into animism kind of deal, and it's very different. It's more like how things used to be in Europe, like we discussed a little bit ago, several thousand years ago, and how it was in the Americas prior to the arrival of Europeans and forcing of Christianity, mostly through torture.
Yeah, yeah, something that we had to talk about. This has concluded our podcast, and if you haven't already, please like, subscribe, and comment below. Also, you see this in there? You like Smart Water? It's really good. Smart Water. If you see us, it's really good. But anyway, yeah, like, comment, and subscribe. If you see any new movies, like down and comment at the bottom of the comment section the things that you like, what you thought about Dune. If you're seeing Eternals, comment down below. If you just want to flame the hell out of DaRon, feel free. If you want to ask him any questions about why he hates white hats or threat hunters and all of that, feel free to comment down below. He loves to chat with you guys about that. And that being said, thank you for watching our podcast. We'll see you in the next one. I'm Roniel.
I'm DaRon.
Later.
Have fun.